So welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and normally on this particular day I wouldn't have been able to do a siege battle of this particular size and length, but considering the newfound extra spare time that I have in light of recent circumstances, I am going to be able to do this one today. So this is of course BUHR SAGATH, which I do like the new aesthetic that this one has had ever since 0.97, the sort of more Mordor-esque mountains that are around instead of the Easterling ones, because while it is maybe a little bit harsh to look at in some respects, I do think that this aesthetic is quite menacing. And also it is one of those settlements, of course, which the evil factions, it makes a little bit more sense for them to defend, and that is what it's going to be today. It's going to be 3 evil armies on the attack and 4 good armies on the defence, and this one may actually work out a little bit differently because it does look as though they have got at least the beginnings of some sort of outer defence here, which is certainly a little bit risky on the part of the defenders, but it could work out, especially considering some of the tools that I have noticed they already have. But we will of course go through the attackers first and foremost. This river looks a little bit sulphurous actually, a little bit yellow, interestingly enough, but we shall first and foremost go through the attackers, starting off over here with Lord Welcome, who's going to be playing with Dorwinion. So Dorwinion, kind of an interesting army. Like, I think a lot of people see Dorwinion as kind of weak when that isn't really the case. They are strong, but they're only strong in a certain way. They have a relatively small roster and their options are relatively limited as well, but they are good at what they do. And in this particular situation as well, their Elvelyn units will be very, very good as that sort of durable front line that you send in, and then later on they can send in some strong, well, more damaging Elven units, which as long as the player who's playing as Dorwinion here uses them well, I think they are exactly the sort of army that can be very, very useful when the forces of good are on the attack. Elvelyn infantry in particular, of course, because they've got very strong armour values. Good unit of line infantry all around. In comparison to some of the better units of line infantry, they don't do as much damage, which is what lets them down slightly. But in this sort of situation, like I mentioned, the main thing is survivability, because you're going to be put into compromising situations where you're going to be taking a lot of range fire, you're going to be fighting normally uphill into a choke point as well, and having a lot more durability helps you a little bit more than having a little bit of extra damage would. So that's definitely a point in Dorwinion's favour there. Similar story for the Elvelyn Vanguard, only with regards to spearmen. Of course, spearmen, generally speaking, aren't the most damaging anyway. This is especially the case for the Vanguard, though. For what they cost, they don't do an awful lot of damage at all, but they are very, very durable, as is the case with most Elvelyn units, which of course, as I said, is going to be very, very useful in this situation. Of course, it's important to intersperse the Elven units throughout, otherwise Dorwinion are a little bit toothless with regards to their attack score. Morroquendi bows are one way you can do that. They can look after themselves decently in melee. They do have a small anti-cavalry bonus in melee, as you'd imagine using those glaives, but of course the main event for them is very damaging missiles and poison missiles at that. So it's kind of unlikely that you're going to be able to force the defenders to break easily in this situation, but it is nonetheless something that you may be able to look at in the late game. So we'll see how quickly the Morroquendi bows are actually used. Elvelyn marksmen back here, which of course in a skirmish fight are very, very strong indeed. Every bit as tough and durable as stuff like the upgraded Bardian marksman and Balaketh marksman. The main difference being that they're not quite as strong in melee as those two units, which again is maybe a slight point against them in relation to those two units, but of course, first and foremost, these units have to be good at being archers, and they have to be good at taking a lot of punishment, which is exactly what the Elvelyn marksmen offer. And in this sort of situation, of course, in an offensive siege, bringing a lot of this kind of unit can make life very difficult for the defenders to get set and use their archers on targets that they want to, and instead you can potentially dictate the pace instead. And then at the back we have some Morroquendi Glade Masters, which is where the general is. Of course, a really, really strong unit of infantry this, around the same sort of level as the mighty Palace Guard from Mirkwood. They're a little bit weaker, but ultimately when it comes to this sort of unit, the margins are so small that it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, because it's so unlikely that you're going to be meeting one-on-one with individual units like that anyway, so they offer much the same sort of thing. And there's bound to be some hidden units around here as well, probably Celdwyn River Patrol, Nandor Glade Guard are there as well, nice unit of shock infantry which can be used later on. Yeah, there's the River Patrol as well, and that's pretty much all we can see from Dorwinion. So pretty much what you'd expect, because Dorwinion, they don't really have a great deal of variance in their compositions because of how small their roster is and because of where their strengths lie. Then we have Arkan, who's the player who sent me this battle replay, who's playing as, again, my personal favourite, I say with the greatest amount of sarcasm possible, Erebor. But in this situation, Erebor, to be fair, won't be able to be their usual static selves and just rely on their crossbows in good positions to do most of the heavy lifting for them. They will at least need to get their crossbows into the right positions if they want to use them effectively. Erebor Legionaries are here, obviously a really strong unit of line infantry. When you're talking about a line infantry that costs around the 800 to 1000 florin mark, you know what sort of level of quality you're going to be getting. And again, this is the kind of unit where they're very durable because of their shields and armour, but they are also able to dish out an awful lot of punishment as well. The problem comes, of course, that they are expensive and you can't afford to throw them into a situation where they're easily going to be focused down by ranged threats or something else, like some potentially getting bogged down in shock infantry. That's not ideal for them either because of their reliance on armour a little bit. But there's no doubting the quality, and of course Dwarven infantry in general is going to be very good at that sort of thing. Upgraded Ironfoot warriors are over here as well, so again, like, this is probably going to be the first line in. And as far as a basic unit of line infantry goes, of course the dwarves are going to have strong infantry. Khazad-dûm may have the slight edge over Erebor in terms of infantry, but as I've said before, Erebor, the support they can put in place for their strong infantry is far superior, and that's what makes Erebor the stronger faction as it stands, in my opinion. Ironfoot warriors in great numbers, so that's good as the first line in. Of course, Ironfoot crossbows and the Blacklock engineers, so 2 of the Ironfoot crossbows, 1 Blacklock engineer. It's a very, very standard thing for the dwarves of Erebor to do because of course they're so effective. The Blacklock engineers in particular, if you get them firing into a choke point that's favourable to them, they're going to rip through an entire army very quickly, so they're a unit which the defenders are going to have to be on the lookout for. Whenever you play against Erebor, really you need to be on the lookout for the Blacklock engineers. There's not really much you can do with regards to the Ironfoot crossbows, because again they're just a sort of standard unit. You can try and whittle them down, but it's kind of difficult. But whereas the smaller Blacklock engineer unit, you need to do something about them because your life quite literally depends on it, with regards to the battle, of course. Ironfoot pikes, nice to see them. Again, they do need to be held back a little bit, as with any phalanx units, otherwise they can be more easily focused down. Yes, the dwarven armour makes them a little bit more resilient than a lot of other basic pike units, but even so, they will be better served by being saved at least until the mid-game, ideally the late game though as well. Interesting to see the mercenary guildsmen here. Obviously Erebor do have access to the mercenary units, you very rarely see them. The reason for bringing them though is the fact that they are AP. Outside of the mercenaries, Erebor's other armour-piercing options are both much more expensive and unshielded. Personally, I would still probably stump up the extra for the Axe Guard of Erebor if you could possibly afford them. But the mercenary guildsmen are still decent. The one concern with them, of course, is going to be morale on the attack. If you send them into a really disadvantageous situation, then they're going to rout fairly quickly. And then finally, we have the Obsidian Guard. Obviously really, really strong in melee, very, very difficult to kill because of their dwarven armour and also the fact they're dual wielders, so their melee skill is ridiculously high. They may not do as much, they don't tend to do their damage very quickly, the Obsidian Guard, but if you embed them, in particular if you put them alongside the standard line infantry, they're so difficult to kill off. And actually there is another unit, the Dragon Slayers, which is where the general is. Obviously this is kind of a different matter because they're AP, so they're a little bit less focused around their own defensive skill, they're a little bit more focused around cleaving through heavily armoured foes, and of course the Dragon Slayers are one of the very best in the game at that sort of thing. Then we have Gothmog, who's playing as the Hobbit folk, so he's got the Bjornings, which is going to be his general's bodyguard. Obviously really, really strong unit. Effectively they kind of remind me of what the Haradrim Warbeasts should be, the sort of rhino-like unit, what they should be if they didn't suck, which I think the hotfix will make them a little bit better actually, so we'll be seeing that sooner rather than later. The rest of the Hobbit army is of course hidden, as is their right, because most of their units can hide anyway, and you know, there's a lot of trees around here, but you can imagine what the Hobbits are going to bring. Lots of cheap shock infantry, lots of cheap armour-piercing spears, interspersed with a few units of high quality like the Ents and the crossbows that they have, the Proudfoot Protectors. And then finally, at the back, the final force of good, we have Dino Man, who's going to be playing as Gondor. Similar strengths to Dorwinion in many ways with regards to their heavy armour focus and their decent nature in a skirmish fight, only their infantry overall is significantly stronger, I would say, in Gondor's favour. However, Gondor will lose out in the cav fight, but in a siege that's not really as important. Unupgraded Gondor archers will just add a little bit more strength to that skirmish alongside Dorwinion. The attackers are pretty well covered there. Citadel Guard on both sides, actually no, not Citadel Guard on both sides, Nimlothian Honour Guard on one side, Citadel Guard over here, as well as the Fountain Guard, so the full range of armor-piercing spears for Gondor. The heart and soul of the faction really. They are all pretty expensive, but if you bring all of them, it's a very, very dangerous infantry force you have, if a little bit small. He does, however, have a lot of Gondor infantry. You can tell that he spent a lot on those more elite infantry units because none of his standard units have got the armour upgrade, which does make them significantly tankier. It's one of the main draws to playing as Gondor, those cheaper armour upgrades you have access to. So the fact that he hasn't been able to afford much of any of them, really, does mean that his infantry may not be as strong as normal. But even so, they'll still be able to do the job. It's definitely a telltale sign when you haven't even upgraded the Axemen or the Sarnak, because they benefit greatly, both visually and mechanically, from having the armour upgrade. Axemen like this usually do suffer from being relatively fragile. The armour upgrade for the Gondorian variant, however, does help that a lot, but without that, they find themselves worse off than even units like the Rhudaur Axemen from Rohan. Then at the back, some Raven Helms and some Wardens of the White Tower, so obviously a lot of infantry strength in Gondor, as you would imagine. Then we have on the defence Mac in the Wild, who's going to be playing as Rhun. So interesting, like I have seen some of these names before, but some of them are completely new to me. Dragon's Wrath Crossbowmen are over here, so this is pre-hotfix, so they're still incredibly frustrating to use, so not as all-round useful as the Blacklock Engineers they're going to have to face off against today, but even so, if nothing else, they're still pretty strong in melee, so they're never going to be a waste, but it's unlikely they'll live up to their potential in this battle. Narim, once again, in this situation maybe not the worst idea in the world to go for the more damage focused archer, because you can get them into a really nice defensive position, give them all the advantages they need, and then the additional damage should be able to do the rest. We shall see. Back here we have some horse archers, interestingly enough, very like mercenary riders, so unorthodox defense this is going to be from Mac in the Wild, I think. Let's hope it works out for him. Horse archers, not going to be terribly useful against Dorwinion, I don't think. Not going to be terribly useful against Erebor either, because they can weather the storm. Probably best against the Hobbits, to be honest with you. Interesting to see if they can be used properly. The cannon, which the cannon is so powerful that in this situation it could be a match winner all on its own, but all that depends on how it's used and where it's positioned. This settlement, there are a few places you could put the cannon to great effect, but a lot of them could be pretty exposed to enemy archers as well, so we'll see. Crossbows, as well as the Scion Rim. More crossbowmen are in there, the Gamp Rim, the Flag Rim, so all of the Golden Boys, albeit in maybe not the same sort of numbers as we're used to seeing them. Probably some hidden units in there as well. Carmel's Chosen over there, some Eastron Guard, and then we get into Mighty Mirko, who's playing as Mordor. This is a name I've seen before, to be fair. Melkor's Chosen, going to be riding presumably with the Horse Archers to give them a little bit of cover, and that's a very scary unit to cover a unit of Horse Archers with. It's unlikely that Horse Archers will be hunted down in melee as long as the Melkor's Chosen stick close to them. There's very few units in the game that will want to tangle with them in a cav-on-cav fight. Nazgul are over here, as you would expect, a lot of quality here from Mordor. Blackguard of Barad-dûr, Temple Executioners, the Troll Drummers, the Olag High, Sauron's Will, all of the good stuff. Blackguard of Barad-dûr on the defence can be surprisingly effective if used correctly. You can sort of counter-push the enemy as they come forward, and it can be really effective if you do it at the right time, but obviously if you do it at the wrong time, as with any mass push, it'll blow up in your face, so it'll be interesting to see how that works out. Orc Javelins and fodder, cheap, may as well bring them along, and Orc Archers as well, just for the ranged pressure as well. Interesting, interesting, interesting. And then we have Rhudaur, played by the Grizzly Fox, so Rhudaur will be able to bring a lot of Javelins on the defence, if nothing else. Rhudaur marksmen are here. The rest of his army looks like it's wrapped all the way around over to here as well. So he's gone for some Enslavers. Franodine Pikemen, no real surprises from the Rhudaur roster, I would imagine, in this situation. Dunman Pikemen here as well. Dunman Spearmen. Well, I suppose the Rhudaur Clansmen not having the armour upgrade is maybe a little bit of a surprise, give them that little bit of extra rigidity when they're holding the lines. Rhudaur Swordsmen are here, however, gone into the red limit on the Franodine Pikemen, which I think actually is very understandable in this situation. Got some more Rhudaur Marksmen. Not seeing any of the Javelin units, but then they can hide, of course, and then a substantial cav force as well. Colfell Maidens, really good at hunting down enemy cav units, of course, with their Javelins and their decent stats in melee against cavalry. They do tend to need support, but they're decent at what they do, especially for their cost. Don't know how they're going to be used here. Again, they can be zoned out relatively easily by a lot of the factions that are on the attack, but cavalry is one of those things. If you've used it well, it can pay for itself, even in a situation like this where it's going to be challenging. And then the armour upgraded, Franodine Nobles as well, so a unit of Lance Knights, which could be so devastating if used correctly again. The Rhudaur Knights, though, are more fragile than most, even with the armour upgrade. The armour piercing in melee won't really help them out too much here, I don't think, because I think most of the threats to all of these defensive ranged units are actually going to be, well, defensive cavalry units I should say, are going to be offensive ranged units. Regardless, without further ado, let's begin. And I actually don't think I will make a cut here. I will turn it up to ×6 speed initially, purely because I'm not entirely sure when the defenders are going to use this cavalry. I would imagine they're going to have to be kind of aggressive with this, because it doesn't really make much sense to save many of these units. You could say that the Variag Mercenary Riders and the Coalfell Maidens could be just used as regular skirmishers within the settlement, but that kind of defeats the point of the mobility they bring to the field. So I'm not sure why you would want to go about things in that way. I mean, Rhudaur kind of have the right idea here. They are going to charge forward and they are going to wait. Unfortunately, they are on the side of things like with Dorwinion and Erebor, with the combination of Dorwinion's really heavily armoured archers, which are going to be really easily able to zone out cavalry like this, and then obviously Erebor's crossbows for when things get a little bit too close for comfort. The Coalfell Maidens would be unlikely to get in range to even use their javelins in the first place before getting absolutely shredded. Also, the Melkor's chosen retreating inside the settlement. The Mighty Mirko, I think, is probably the most experienced player that's on the defence. Well, the Grizzly Fox I've seen play a couple of times as well, but yeah, you really don't want to be just squirreling away your Melkor's chosen inside the settlement, because they're by far the strongest anti-cavalry option you could have if you were to sally out. I mean, the Runic player at the very least does have his Variag Mercenary Riders down here in this little area. Going to be able to move around a little bit, perhaps waiting for the Hobbits. In fact, I think I will make a little bit of a cut, come to think of it, because it looks as though the attackers are going to take a little bit of time. And I think the defenders are still kind of working out what it is they fully want to do. So yeah, I will actually make a little bit of a cut here. I've changed my mind. Emphasis on a little bit of a cut, because immediately you can see here the Rhudaur player is moving forward, and perhaps this decisive action is exactly what was called for, because I think Dorwinion and Erebor, they are moving forward maybe a little bit arrogantly, and the Coalfell Maidens are going to be able to get into position, and more than that, they're going to be able to go after a pretty decent target here. They're going to try and shave away at the Ironfoot pikes. Any javelin that hits is probably going to be enough to kill one of these dwarfs, to be honest with you. Now, the problem here is Grizzly Fox has executed the first part of this plan very, very nicely, but he does need to keep his Coalfell Maidens moving, I think. If he doesn't, if he keeps them static here, then they're going to get shredded by Dorwinion's archers. You can see a few poison arrows coming from the Morroquendi bows as well, which is likely to rout the Coalfell Maidens a little bit quicker. Rhudaur are not exactly well known for their armour values, and the Coalfell Maidens are no exception. They may wear that chainmail, which gives them a little bit of protection, as well as those wooden round shields, but again, it's not ideal. This one unit, however, is the one that's being focused down. This one is still pretty much at full strength, and what are they going to be firing their javelins at? Yeah, they're going to be going in here. Again, going after a good target, I have to say, so he's not just unthinkingly throwing his javelins into some of the units which maybe aren't quite as dangerous, like the Elvalin Vineguard and infantry. He does need to keep moving, force pathing his units away from these Vineguard, however. He was going after the Nandor Glade Guard, and he did a good amount of damage to them as well. Off go the Coalfell Maidens. The other unit of Maidens managed to get away as well without routing. I mean, Rhudaur do have slightly higher morale than your average Evil Men faction, so perhaps that shouldn't be too much of a surprise. This Elvalin Vineguard unit is getting maybe a little bit too advanced. I mean, in that situation, maybe I would actually do a bit of damage to the Vineguard. If they're going to chase you that far away from the support of their archers, maybe it is worthwhile. Those Morroquendi Glade Masters are there as well. If that can be a unit you can go after, it's possible that these Coalfell Maidens have already run their ammo supply dry. Of course, Javelin Cavalry doesn't have the biggest supply of ammo. So again, throwing a few jabbies in there to the Elvalin Vineguard, doing some more damage, but once again, arrows coming forward. It does, of course, I mean, in a roundabout sort of way, you could say it takes away from the ammo supply of Dorwinion later on. Makes life a little bit more comfortable when you do post up in your settlement, but there are probably cheaper ways you can go about it than turning your Coalfell Maidens into pincushions. Rhun Nobles are still back there as well. Yeah, you can see here that still under a lot of pressure, but you can also tell here, I think, that maybe the Elvalin Marksman are definitely more of a defensive archer. If this, for example, was Lothlorien, these Coalfell Maidens would be long dead under the pressure from the really high damage Elven archers. Whereas as it is, of course, the Dorwinion archers, much more focused around being more dominant in a skirmish fight, and their individual arrows don't do as much damage. Still sufficient for this purpose, but still. They were shaken for a little while there after they had a minor brush with the Elvalin Vineguard. Ultimately, I would say this sally out hasn't really been worth it so far, and part of that is because they have gone up against the pair of factions against which this would be the least effective, I think. I think it'd be much easier over here, and you can see here the Hobbits are here, and they're coming. No, Tookish Hunters are there. Banderbrass Archers as well, so they're going forward with the Archers first and foremost. The Ents are here. The first volley comes in from the Variag Mercenary Riders. The Hobbits, I think, are actually a little bit harder to hit, which is really annoying. It's another one of those annoying little quirks of the Hobbits, whereby you can't actually hit them as easily because they're smaller. But if you do hit them, their armour values are obviously not terrific. Banderbrass Archers are a little bit better than the Turkish Hunters, but still not a huge amount. Got the shooting circle going on here. Every time I've used the shooting circle in any Medieval 2 game, whether it be vanilla or one of its submods, one of its many total conversions, a shooting circle has never seemed to be all that effective for me. I mean, it's better than just standing still, and they're doing a decent job here, but the problem is, like, they're really not going to be able to pay for themselves too easily, especially not with the Ents coming forward. The Ents are just going to force these horse archers to move. Having said that, the Hobbits have also maybe overextended themselves a little bit. The Rhudaur Nobles should go in. Coalfell Maidens going in. This is going to be interesting, actually. The Rhudaur Nobles should be able to get a charge off here. I mean, unfortunately for them, actually, I think the Variag Mercenary Riders are kind of in the way of the charge. Because much in the same way as Trolls, well, they are going to be able to connect somewhat. In much the same way as Trolls, if you do charge into the Ents, you can skewer them. You do need to cycle out pretty quickly, though, because, of course, the Ents are devastating in melee. But if you can cycle charge with the Nobles here, you can kill off the Ents, and that is a very worthwhile target to try and kill off. Over here you can see the Coalfell Maidens again, they do rout. They actually did connect with that charge, doing some damage to the Turkish Hunters, but the Coalfell Maidens have ultimately... They haven't been useless, but I don't think they paid for themselves either. Not the sort of start you want if you are defenders. Another charge coming in. Another Ent falls. Need to continue to move around again. This is a sign again of a fairly inexperienced player, I would say. Yeah, the Variag Mercenary Riders, this is a little bit better. I was going to say, it looked like he was shooting at the Ents then, which is completely unnecessary. You're more likely to do friendly fire damage when you're doing that. Forward come the Melkor's Chosen now. Better late than never. They need to hurry up, I think. And it is interesting, actually, that Gondor and the Hobbits have sent forward their archers relatively unsupported. There are javelins back there, but it's bandits. The Melkor's Chosen, they may take a couple of losses here as they go in Last Samurai style, and they don't. I mean, heavily armoured, shielded as well, the Melkor's Chosen. The main advantage they have over something like the Champions of the White Hand, you can just see they're going to absolutely mow through these Hobbit archers that are completely unsupported. Like, it surprises me as well, the Hobbits, with all the Hobbitry and arms that the Hobbit armies usually have in them, it surprises me that they weren't, at least one unit of them wasn't sent forward to prevent something like this happening. The Melkor's Chosen are going to be able to fill their boots here, and so far, the cavalry hasn't been... Well, the initial phase of the cavalry over on the other side wasn't all that good, and I feel vindicated, really, that the Hobbits and Gondor were the better target to go after than Erebor and Dorwinion in this situation. In come the Rhudaur Nobles again. Again, they're going to charge into the Ents, and this time, only one of them remains. You have to say, the Rhudaur Nobles have been used very well by Rhudaur. They didn't have much luck with their Coalfell Maidens, but with their Knights, they've already lanced through the Ents, which is such a deadly unit as well. Coalfell Maidens coming in. Now Gondor are getting forward with some of their supporting units, so now the Melkor's Chosen is not going to be able to come in as readily, and the Melkor's Chosen needs to keep moving because they're actually wavering here. They're taking so much damage from archers at this point, and they're getting they're going to get too close to the Lothian Honor Guard. That's going to be the end of them, broken and fighting to the death. Very mixed fortunes for this cavalry force here, and they still have some of it out here. Coalfell Maidens still throwing some javelins, Variag Mercenary Riders still doing some damage in their shooting circle, Rhudaur Nobles still healthy enough to make a big impact with those lancers. Melkor's Chosen, they won't have paid for themselves either though. For as many Turkish Hunters as they kill, you can get 3 or 4 units of Turkish Hunters, closer to 4 I would say, for a single unit of Melkor's Chosen, and they barely finished off one. So when you look at it in those terms, not ideal. In comes another charge, again dangerously close to the Lothian Honor Guard. Once again they do hit the Hobbit archers. At the very least they are taking chunks out of the skirmish power of the attackers here, but again these are all expensive units that they're using to do it. The rough economy of war. More arrows coming in. Gondor obviously backing up the Hobbits. The Hobbits, their defence comes from their being slightly harder to hit. Gondor much more traditional, obviously packing on some of the armour, although in this case the Gondor archers just going for the chainmail and tabard as opposed to the full plate that we are more used to seeing them in perhaps. Rhudaur Nobles and Coalfell Maidens still there. There's still one Ent left alive. Like I said, very mixed fortunes. Over here you can see Dorwinion and Erebor starting to form up. Still dragging their heels maybe a little bit. Like, there's really no opposition to them at this stage. They may as well move forward a little bit quicker, considering all of the attentions at this point are focused on this side. The bandits actually throwing a javelin volley, maybe slightly wasted on the Coalfell Maidens at this point because they're routing. Any additional volleys that hit them, not going to be all that worthwhile as they rout into the bandits and of course will be finished off. So yeah, Coalfell Maidens, not all that effective in this situation. Aggressive javelin cavalry on the defence on siege, especially against factions like Gondor and Dorwinion, who you know are going to be able to bring solid archers. Questionable. Ooh, here again, like the Nimlothian Honour Guard. The horse archers do charge in. They do connect once again with the Hobbit archers, but these horse archers are wavering already, unsurprisingly, because they're taking range fire. They were in melee with Nimlothian Honour Guard and the Variac Mercenary Riders. Rout as a result, and they rout into the enemy army, so no chance that any of them will be coming back. Cranadine nobles do charge into the bandits and again do connect. If there has been one cavalry unit to pay for itself, it has been the nobles, because they have managed to charge into the Hobbit archers, they have charged into the bandits, and they have killed off the Ents, which, much more like it. Any additional value they can get would be most welcome for the defenders, I'm sure, but so far, I think the attackers will be fairly pleased with how this has gone, because of course all of those units of cavalry represents a whole bunch of gold that wasn't spent on more infantry to defend the settlement's interior. Yeah, these Ranadine nobles, like, they need to be decisive here. If they're going to hang around in front of these armies, they need to charge in sooner rather than later, because so many archers are going to be hitting them. And even with the armour upgrade, like I said, among the knights, like, they're still tanky, especially with the armour upgrade, and from the front with those shields, but next to other units of knights, the Ranadine nobles do lack a little bit in terms of survivability. And I think that is fairly obvious here. More arrows coming in. I mean, that is perhaps the silver lining to this. Like, all of the attacking armies, with the exception of Erebor, because of course they don't have archers, have used up a lot of their archer ammunition at this point. So, you know, got to look for the good in these situations, I suppose. And I don't know. It's a lot of value to lose for a limited amount of gain. Is that going to be a rout? No, it's not. They've been shaken for a little while at this point, the Franadine nobles, but they've stuck around for longer than I thought they would, to give them their credit. There's the Hobbitry in arms. Rhudaur swordsmen up there, so the initial Rhudaur forces are there, but they're sticking out, and I mean, I can understand why, because Rhudaur are busy microing what's left of their battered cavalry force. But you really don't want your Rhudaur force just sticking out like this, because it's just asking for them to be skirmished down. And Rhudaur, of course, most certainly not the. Ooh, hello. What is that? Ah, a decent position indeed for the runic cannon to position itself in. If they can hit into the centre mass of some of these units, they can get a lot of killing done. A little bit too spread out for my liking at the moment, but Ranadine nobles moving around, still taking damage from the archers, so that's more ammunition they're absorbing, to be fair. Definitely a decent performance from the Rhudaur knights. The rest of the cavalry not quite so much, but still. And to be fair, I mean, this is Hobbitry in arms. They're a little bit more focused around their AP. That's not going to be as much of a problem for Rhudaur, who don't pack on as much armour as many other factions. And so you'd imagine Rhudaur swordsmen should be fine in this situation. Dunman spearmen just there to back them up as the first melee engagements begin, but there's plenty more where that came from the Hobbits. They're capable of fielding very large armies, of course. The sort of thing which usually the likes of Rhudaur and Mordor enjoy a premium on. Farmers of Buckland being shot, and that's a good target to go after. These guys are really, really damaging. Like, they don't look like much farmers with big sickles. Scythes, I should say. But their charge bonus is really, really high, and they do a lot of armour-piercing damage, so if you can shoot them like this in the way Rhudaur are doing, you absolutely should. And I will give Grizzly Fox that credit. Like, he may not have been able to use his Coalfell Maidens as well as he would have liked, but he has been picking the right targets to go after with his archers and other ranged units. So he clearly knows where the more dangerous units are and where the more vulnerable units are. He hasn't been wasting his ammunition on stuff like Hobbitry in arms or Elvelyn infantry, like I said. Defeat seems like a certainty for the Rhudaur front line, and I think a lot of that has to do with the support coming in. The long bottom hob are there. Like, as far as thrown projectile units go, they have a very low base damage, but even so, a lot of ammunition, and if they just are allowed to stand here, slowly but surely, they can rack up a decent little kill count for themselves, and the support is all the Hobbits need here, slowly but surely wearing Rhudaur down. Ooh boy. Granadine Rangers giving them the business, and that will turn that fight right around in the other direction. The Hobbits will need to have some sort of answer to those Rhudaur Rangers, otherwise their army will find itself getting depleted very, very quickly, even with all their numbers. So Dorwinion are going to lead the way here with the Elvalin, which I actually think is the right call. Dorwinion's Elvalin in first, supported by some of the first wave of the Dwarven Erebor units. Then the more elite Erebor units come, and then at the very end, the Dorwinion Elves, or Elves. And I say that because they're by far the most vulnerable to ranged units, and it's in the later game you're much less likely to be peppered down like that. Erebor, even with their elites, even though it may not be desirable to send your units into a kill zone like that, they can at least stand up to it better than stuff like the Glaive Masters and stuff like the Nandor Glaive Guard. You can tell that Rangers are being used somewhere because the frames are just sort of popping in and out. Granadine Rangers are still firing, you can see there. Battling Brandy Bucks moving in, and the Hobbits actually do break through there. Gondor coming in, so in spite of the huge damage that Rhudaur were doing, their front line still wasn't solid enough. They needed more men on the front line, and considering the kills they were getting, I think it would have been worthwhile to send more reinforcements there and try and hold that line. Even with the long bottom mob there, holding, I think it would have been worthwhile. Carmel's Shadow Guard forming up the front line, that's an interesting one. The Hobbits would be the faction these guys would be least useful against, it must be said. Every other faction has got heavily armoured units, the Hobbits not really. They'd be useful against the Ents, but the Ents have already been neutralised by the Granadine nobles. You can just see, like this is the thing with the Hobbits, they're very orcish in the way they go about their business, actually, in many ways. They come forward with just so many numbers, and they have bonuses and all the right things with regards to AP and good high damage units and good support units as well, that they can be super awkward to deal with. And you can see here that part of the problem I can see already for the defenders is they're not setting up front lines that are thick enough. They need to send forward more units to hold, otherwise the Hobbits are just going to continue to mass up into a big ball and smash through defence one after the other. It's a problem I've seen time and time again. I can see what the Granadine Rangers are going to want to do here. They're going to want to get into position and try and shoot into that blob, I think. Which, again, would probably be worthwhile, especially if they're not going to send forward any more in terms of infantry. Eastron Clansmen are going to move in. Yeah, here we go. Right, let's be careful here. Yeah, they've got a good angle in there as well, so that's going to be a lot of damage being done to the Hobbits. Once again, if they don't have sufficient manpower on that front line, it's not really going to matter because they're going to push through it pretty quickly. Again though, with tools like Rangers and with the Dragon's Breath, it's very dangerous for the defenders, even though they did lose a lot of value with their cavalry and didn't really make that value back in the early game. Tools like Rangers and the Dragon's Breath Cannon do allow you to make that back much more quickly. Meanwhile, Blackguard of Barad-dûr, perhaps sensing the fact that just a single unit of Vineguard is weak from Dorwinion, the fodder was immediately reinforced with the Great Shield Infantry, and now the Vineguard being overwhelmed in melee, so more is going to be needed. The Ironfoot Crossbows are here, Ironfoot Warriors, Erebor now joining the fray. What are the crossbows going to shoot at though? Is it worthwhile to use the crossbows on this? Possibly. I mean, there are also Sauron's Will in there, so yeah, it is absolutely. Between the Great Shield Infantry and the Sauron's Will, using a few crossbow bolts to clear out this initial line is definitely worthwhile, but the Orc fodder are going to try and get to them, I think, or are they going to try and wrap around? I mean, there's not much that a handful of Orc fodder are going to be able to do against Elvalin Infantry and Ironfoot Warriors, to be honest with you. The support of the crossbow is going to be very, very useful there. Up on top of the hill you can see the Orc Archers are there, but of course the beauty of playing as Erebor, or Cardlin actually, is the fact that their crossbows are heavily armoured and shielded, which makes Archers not really a great counter to them, to be honest with you, especially when they're close together like this, because if Erebor wished it, they could just target and a couple of volleys into the Orc Archers and they cease to be much of a threat, to be honest with you. Not that you would want to shoot the Orc Archers if you had a choice, but I mean, the option is there. Temple Executioners are getting shot as well. They need to get out of the firing range. Like, again, this is a bit of a poor mistake from Mighty Mirko. Like, this is not the sort of unit you can... I can see what he's trying to do here, actually. I think he's trying to use the chanting from the Temple Executioners. I'm not sure whether they're close enough for that to actually work, though, and more to the point, they're getting shot. Like, the stray shots that are hitting the Orc Javelins are hitting the Temple Executioners. You really don't want that. You don't want to be throwing away one of your most elite infantry units for that purpose, if you can help it. Rhudaur marksmen are firing. What have we got here? Eastron crossbowmen getting into position. There's not much for them to go after. I mean, there are Fountain Guard over there. That was a blank shot, so they're going to try and... Amazingly enough, there are still Randalline Nobles here, and there is still a unit that's firing at them. I think it's one of the really depleted units, so yes, 31 Turkish Hunters, so it's really not an important thing, but if Rhudaur wanted to, they could still make a bit of a nuisance of themselves with this unit, just try and make it a little bit more awkward to advance. But I think Rhudaur has got other things on their mind, namely, Rhudaur marksmen are firing, no Rangers firing at this point, and you can see actually the Rangers have had the desired effect. There's a carpet of Hobbit bodies that are on the floor now, and you know, the Rhudaur marksmen, they may not offer the same punch as the Rangers, but against really lightly armoured infantry like the Hobbits, they are going to be just fine. And now also coming in, there are some more heavily armoured forces from Gondor and Dorwinion, but also a good move from Rhudaur to commit the Black Waltz, because the Black Waltz, of course, really, really strong against armoured targets. Berserker class units, there's a lot of friendly fire coming in there though from the Nar Rim, which is not what you want, especially not into the backs of Dunman pikemen, because they're low tier, so their morale's not going to hold together as well. And of course, you know, as far as pikes go, they are one of the most vulnerable to archers, and that is saying something. But Rhudaur stabilised pretty well over here. The Hobbits made some progress, but for all of this progress, they had to spill a lot of their own blood. And I think Gondor is going to have to pick up more and more of this slack, to be honest with you. There's still some long bottom mob in here, Band of Brass archers, so the Hobbits still with a lot of their supporting units, still doing damage. But you can see over here already, more depleted than it will be on the other side. But the other side is definitely going to be more of a slow burn, I think. Ironfoot crossbows have done some damage. And again, this counter-attack from Mordor started off okay, but it has since fizzled out. I mean, the support of the Dwarven crossbows was always going to be a bit of a problem. The Orcs tried to do the same with their javelins, but they got focused down. Unlike the crossbows, when they come under range fire, they're wooden plank shields and scraps of leather for armour are not really the same sort of thing as fine Dwarven craftsmanship. Such is the way of things. The other unit of Blackguard of Barad-dûr is coming down, which is interesting. I mean, them on the front line does mean that these units are supporting archers that are trying to do some damage. Won't actually be very effective at all, because Elvelyn marksman, of course, not the most damaging archer in the first place when you're dealing with a shield value as massive as the Blackguard of Barad-dûr's. Pretty tough to break through that. Having said that, AP coming forward, Glade Guard and Merc Guildsmen. With a lot of these units coming in, that will be where they can do damage on those units. Again, though, a bit of friendly fire coming in from the attackers. They can afford it maybe a little bit more. Let's have a little look at what's going on back here. I mean, how much do the attackers have left over here? I mean, not that much, to be fair. I mean, a lot of it is concentrated over there in that opening, but I mean, they've got some depleted units back here. Dorwinion did also send some units over here, let's not forget. So it has been a fairly punishing push, this, for the attackers. They are, however, starting to look like they're making a little bit of progress. Randalline Rangers are firing, so let's just back up a little bit, shall we? Rangers firing in there. I did notice the Eastron Warriors, the unshielded lower end runic infantry unit. Of course, they make up for that by being a little bit stronger in melee, which may be what is called for in there, although with long bottom mob firing at them, that's unlikely. All they need to do, though, is delay the attackers a little bit more for a lot of this range damage to bite in just a little bit more. And I think that will be the play for the defenders here. The Rangers most certainly will have already inflicted a pretty grisly toll, I would imagine. Still with a bit of ammunition as well, trying to get into an even better position as well. There are the axe throwers as well, so once again, Rhudaur are in this situation. If they're allowed to get like their Rangers set up, their axe throwers and their javelins firing into an enemy blob like this, they can deal so much damage so quickly. Like, they may lack a little bit of rigidity when they're on the defense with regards to their armor and just the general survivability of their units, but their range damage more than makes up for that. So devastating in that sort of situation. Meanwhile, again, over here, I'm not the biggest fan of just sending in the mercenaries on their own. Like, the AP, of course, will be very useful against these Mordor units, but a little bit more support, I think, wouldn't go amiss. Even if it's just a unit of Elvelyn Vanguard, I think that would be fine. Orc archers there. There's still the Orc javelins. Temple executioners still firing. But yeah, I think Mordor will probably be okay with how this fight has gone. Like, they haven't really punished the attackers all that much, but the attackers haven't really made any ground, and they haven't really done huge damage themselves, so they won't be too concerned, I don't think. That may change, of course. Alban Vanguard are there, or marksmen, I should say. Erebor legionaries. I mean, this is the thing. Like, haven't really seen the dwarves commit any of their really strong units as of yet. Erebor legionaries are still here, of course. The elite units are still further back. There's still the matter of the pikes that they have to deal with in the late game, but I mean, I suppose there are some Elven infantry still on the front line, but I don't know, like, mercenaries always worry me in this situation because, yes, the AP should be enough with the support they've already had, the damage that was already done to the black card for them to be victorious in this situation, but if they start taking losses unsupported like this, mercenaries can rout really easily. Erebor in general, like, one of the things that is a surprising weakness for them, in comparison with like other Elven and Dwarven and Númenórean factions, their morale isn't actually that great. Not that it needs to be, considering their strengths in other areas, but still, it's an interesting little thing. Rhudaur clansmen, I'm just making sure there are no rangers firing. There actually are. There are Dunedain rangers, although they've been absolutely shredded. Unsurprising, maybe I think they were probably sent forward a little bit soon from Gothmog, if I'm being brutally honest. Forward comes another unit of Trollshore axe throwers. As soon as they made themselves visible in here, all of the Rhudaur marksmen would have targeted them down. Rhanadign pikemen coming in, so they are insistent on holding this line, and I think that's correct from a defensive point of view. I think they can really make this work for them if they continue to hold this ground, because the attackers have already committed so much into trying to push through here. The longer you delay them, the worse it's going to be for them, and again, more. Like, this is the thing. What are they actually firing at there, the Trollshore axe throwers? I think they were actually going after... That was actually a pretty good example there of the Hobbits being a little bit harder to hit, because under normal circumstances that would have butchered a unit, whereas in this case only a dozen or so actually died. There's still, of course, the Gondor archers. Out of ammunition, some of them, by the looks of things. There's still a lot to be committed over here, including some of the scarier units Gondor have available to them, like Citadel Guard. 2 units of Citadel Guard. Interestingly enough, I think the Nimlothians were already committed. They are in... Well, the Fountain Guard are most certainly in there, as are the Nimlothians, but they have taken damage already. Oof, and again, like, the shields are not going to be coming into effect there. They're being... bouncing off to the moon, that one. Firing off into the distance there. I mean, this is a worry, because with the Dragon's Breath in that sort of position, they're going to need to duck most of their units behind this, but that of course means they're further away from reinforcing, and their attack is actually falling apart here. This could be devastating news for the attackers. It's always a bad sign when you see an attack fall apart with no reinforcements there to keep it going. It's always a bit of a red light. It's not necessarily a bad thing for them to not continue to attack, because if they do, then the cannon will probably rip them to pieces. But you always feel, maybe it's not going so well. And the Rhanadign pikemen, I'm a big fan of the Rhanadign pikes. They always hold the line really, really well. You can't use ranged units on them quite so easily because of their shield value. Their stats in general are actually pretty good. Very comparable to stuff like the Annuminous Gate Guards, and they always seem to rack up a decent kill count. Perhaps you could put that down to Rhudaur's slightly higher focus on attack, which will be very useful to bolster a unit of pikes kills. I mean, this now, I think over here, this engagement becomes a little bit more important for the attackers. This is where a bit of battlefield awareness also comes in. Like, if you're Dorwinion, or Erebor, Dorwinion especially, because they've committed units over there, they know what's happening. They need to realise that they probably need to start making some progress over here, worrying the defenders a little bit more, because the longer the defenders can stall them out here, the more and more likely a single choke point battle becomes. And that's always going to favour the defenders. The higher quality focus the defenders often have, the really advantageous positions that a settlement like this offers to you, very rarely is that going to seem like a good thing to attackers. But over here they also have far more men that they can use to reinforce. More, you know, again, like Eastron Clansmen, like, they're only a basic unit and they're without the armour upgrade, but again, it's just stalling the attackers out, keeping them down here for just that little bit longer. I think maybe they could probably get away with sending another unit down here. I mean, it's clear they're trying to get some value from their orc archers up here. Yeah, and again, they're going to try and focus down the crossbows. And you may as well with orc archers. Keldrin Rune Patrol are there as well, though. Looking like they might be out of ammunition, though, because they've got the swords. They are going to go after them. They're retreating, which tells me they actually do have ammo, and it was a red herring all along. It was a ruse. Let's go and see what's happening over on this side of things. Which, thus far, it's gone quite well for the defenders. Of course, it can always be a little bit tricky for the defenders, because you can play really well, but you can end up just running out of manpower before the attackers do. And that is looking more and more like what may happen over on this side unless they send forward more men to reinforce. There are some clansmen over here. The Trollshire Axe Throwers have now joined the fight in melee, but they're going up against Nimlothians. Nimlothian Honour Guard, even with only 14 of them. They're going to take their toll. And I think slowly but surely, with more and more of Gondor's stronger units being committed to the fight, like Ravenhelms are now there supporting the Fountain Guard that were already there. Another unit of Gondor infantry being committed in. This defensive line definitely has a certain shelf life on it. But at what cost for the attackers? Because Gondor and the Hobbits are definitely going to be badly bloodied after all of this. Witcher and Slavers coming down. Will Rhudaur try and hold on to this still? It's looking like they might. I mean, Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen are coming in from Rhun as well. They've got their little projectiles, which, to be honest with you, in pre-hotfix terms are actually not brilliant. But they do have a pretty decent shot that they can fire in. More to the point as well, I mean, their presence in melee might not go amiss with their really high defensive skill. In come the Enslavers, which that should be enough, but I mean, the Citadel Guard have been added in now. It's a lot of AP on both sides. I think the Witcher Enslavers will probably just about emerge victorious without any range support coming in from the attackers, but it's... Ugh. In come the Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen. They did charge in and then they changed their mind, which is never a good sign. That there is the Narim, you can tell, because it's the cosmetic fire arrows. They don't actually do any additional morale damage, but it certainly looks pretty cool. Citadel Guard are in there. Rhudaur marksmen that are out of ammunition being committed in now as well, so it's sort of all hands to the pump for Rhudaur. But I don't know, it's a bit desperate when you're sending in Rhudaur marksmen to hold back Citadel Guard, but that was a pretty decent volley there from the throwing daggers. Another unit of Rhudaur clansmen coming in, so they are determined to hold this line, and I think Mordor, sensing the fact that his allies have sort of made their decision, they're going to hold here, death or glory. Mordor's going to send over some support, and the Olag High are fine support to have indeed in this situation, because Gondor have already sent forward most of their dangerous units to Trolls. The Axemen of Lasarnak are here, but again, they're a little bit more fragile than they otherwise would be. And if they wade in here, as long as they avoid the Fountain Guard and the Nimlothians, they can charge in here and they can do a good amount of damage. Again, more throwing daggers coming in. Desperate or no, the defenders have made the best of this situation over here. I think there could maybe be a bit of a lack of nuance to how the Hobbits and Gondor have gone about this attack, but I mean, it's still fairly scary to have to withstand that kind of pressure, and mountain trolls coming in from Mordor as well. I didn't even notice them, so a lot of trolls. What are they going to do in this situation, I wonder, because now at this point again the tables seem to be turning once again in favour of the defenders. So what's happening over here? A little bit of movement. Dorwinion and Erebor managing to get through that one unit of clansmen finally. Now the question is, how do they reform their lines over here? Because they do need to organise over here a little bit better, because Dorwinion are going to flood forwards. Need to make up their mind of what they're going to do here. I mean, Scion Rim are all well and good for holding the line, but alone, alongside, well, I mean, there's Temple Executioners, there's Nazgul over here. Like, this is not very well organised at all. Like, they need to set up a more organised line than this, because if Mordor throw away their elite units while they're busy fiddling with their trolls on the other side of the field, and they're going to be left behind. The Scion Rim are running. The Bulldogs are here. What are they going to do? If I were Mordor, I would be screaming at the Runic player right now, saying, no, don't run away, get your Scion Rim back into that fight. We can't afford to leave that many elite units behind to be slaughtered just because you want to preserve a unit of spears. But equally, if I were the Runic player, I would be a little bit unimpressed with how Mordor has just completely fallen asleep here and allowed this to happen. I mean, yes, Temple Executioners and Nazgul will be able to butcher Elvelyn en masse, But this is a situation that Erebor and Dorwinion can absolutely take advantage of, especially seeing as there's not really... I think that's the Gondorian general, but... there's clearly not a unified idea of what to do here. Mordor are just sort of hanging around. Rhun are running away. And Rhudaur don't have anything over on this side because most of their army has already been engaged and is largely gone. Mordor's got to have noticed this by this point, and if he has, I mean, now you have no choice but to stand and fight with your elites, because there's no escape at this point, not without taking a ridiculous amount of casualties. So you've got to commit your bulldogs. They're armour piercing, so they'll do a ton of damage to Helvellyn. Rhun have got to send their units in as well. Like, it's poor, that is very poor, and the defenders, for all the good work they've done on this side, they may be about to wipe it out here. Reforged javelins over here, like they're still making progress. And well, there's a lot of friendly fire. There's a lot of friendly fire as well coming in from the Narwhal. In come the Bjornings. That was, I think, the Rhudaur general. Yeah, and they're routing now because they don't have the manpower on this front line to hold. But I think over here that's fine. They've done enough damage to the Hobbits and Gondor. But if the price for that was... ooh, I don't like the looks of this, honestly. Getting surrounded. The Bulldogs are in, at least, but not before a partial surround happened with the Helvellyn. And you can see here, Temple Executioners are in. Javelins firing at point blank. Helvellyn infantry now just marching in, and they're going to be able to surround the Bulldogs here. Good move from the Dorwinion player, as long as the Helvellyn don't rout. Don't know what the Helvellyn infantry are actually doing. They should be focusing down the Bulldogs. All of Mordor's elites are here now. All of them. They're yours to finish off if you choose to do it. And yes, there are Eastron crossbows in support. There are Adunaim shadow bows, which... I mean, if this was all a ruse to use the Adunaim shadow bows from Mordor, like, fair enough, I suppose, but I still don't think that's worthwhile, because it's still... if you're the attackers, that's still an opportunity you can grasp. And all you need to do as the attackers to prevent this from happening is simply push up some more of your ranged units and start firing at the shadow bows and the crossbowmen. And that is something the attackers do need to do. I think the attackers over on this side have been guilty of playing this a little bit too by the book, a little bit too slow. And that could be used to the defenders' advantage. In come the Bjornings, and yeah, like this now, with gaps in the defences. And the defenders, they've been a little bit too oblivious to things like this here in the middle section of the battle. And the Bjornings are coming in. Eastron crossbows are very fragile in melee and at range. They may have the same sort of stopping power as every other crossbow unit, but they are much more fragile, and the Bjornings gonna do damage. A lot of damage. The Bjornings are very, very powerful at this sort of thing. They are very limited, and they, again, much in the same way as other units that are small but individually very powerful, they have that burst of effectiveness before they do ultimately fall away. They're going to continue to charge in, and they're just not letting them go. They've got really high mass as well, which makes them very difficult to stop. Honestly, I mean, they are continuing to charge. Their hit points must be gone because they're dying pretty quickly at this point. They're going after the Dragon's Breath, which that is the right target to go after. Fair play to Gothmog for that. Although, is he? What's he doing? He needs to continue to go after the siege. Taking care of that, and you put yourself in a very healthy position as the battle enters its final stages. Narwhal are here. Another defensive line set up. Gondor at this point, very depleted. Dunedain Rangers over there. Just look at this over here though, look. Longbottom mob, at this point pulling out their big wooden clubs. Gondor actually, like Gondor and the Hobbits. There are these Proudfoot protectors over here, of course, crossbowmen. Crossed with pikemen, one of the most awkward units to fight in the game. Like in a field battle, they can be just so awkward to deal with, because primarily what you want to do with your crossbows, if you can, is charge them with cavalry, but of course the fact that they're pikemen means that you can't really do that, so you have to try and mob them with strong infantry, but of course if you do that, you're probably going to be walking into a Hobbit trap with hidden units on all sides. Not such an issue in a siege battle, of course, but they're still good crossbowmen at the end of the day, so if they get firing into your ranks, you're going to be in trouble. Continuing to push the Hobbits and Gondor, which I will give them credit for that. They've been beating their head against this brick wall for a while at this point. They've made ground. I don't think either of these two armies, to be honest, is going to see the end of the battle. Maybe a couple of units or an individual unit from each army, but it is going to be up to Dorwinion and Erebor to see this over the line. And they should be able to. Adunheim shadow bows, out of ammunition by the looks of them. The troll drummers, all dead. I have to say, I mean, the Temple Executioners and the Nazgul, wherever, did the Nazgul get away, I wonder? Or are they dead? At least one of them must still, yeah, I mean, no, that's the Mordor general there, it's one of the Bulldogs. Any Nazgul still alive over here? I find it hard to believe they would all be dead, although with Dragon Slayers and other Dwarven units arriving, maybe they would be. It's kind of hard to judge. Let's have a look up here. Did they get away? That's the Carmel's chosen. Looks like Rhun are the ones that are going to have to put on this last stand, mostly by themselves. Don't know if I'd be all that impressed if I were Mordor with the runic player leaving the elite units to die, but simultaneously, if I were Rhun, I wouldn't be all that impressed with how clumsy Mordor were in leaving them there in the first place. Yeah, I think the Nazgul are gone. They probably have lasted longer than I initially expected them to, the Mordor elites over here, but it's not really the way you want to be seeing your elites fall, and I think with this decision, I think the attackers are probably going to go on to be victorious in this battle, if I had to hazard a guess. I could be wrong, but I doubt it. Still Orc Archers, still firing away, trying to get whatever value they can. I mean, this is a very interesting situation here, like, the Gamp Rim are here sort of preventing them from being charged, but the longer they stand here, the more damage they're going to take from range units. Again, just little puzzling choices like that from the defenders is the sort, well, they're the sort of choices which I think are the reason why the defenders ultimately, when it comes time for the final stand, I think it's going to be, I think the battle will be too far beyond them to recover. Still the Bjornings are alive as well, like they are depleted, but they're still making a nuisance of themselves, still carving their way through soft targets like Eastron Crossbowmen, coming in here against the Rangers as well, more damage being done. Very good work from the Hobbit player, considering he has been mostly face tanking all of the damage in this battle. He is also racking up good kill counts with some of his high damage units here. Meanwhile, pushing forward, Ranodyne Pikemen still holding the line. Nar Rim at this point having to hold back what remains of the Gondorian host, which is to say not much, but enough to be able to deal with a unit of archers that are out of ammo at least. Rhudaur are trying to save some units. They might, I mean they probably will get away to be fair, but this of course will mark the end of the resistance over here for the defenders. But I mean, to be fair, there's not much of the attackers left over here either. This is the sort of, well, there goes the Mordor general. This is the sort of performance I think Rhudaur can actually be fairly pleased with, especially considering the fate of his cavalry early on. His nobles probably just about paid for themselves, but his Coalfell Maidens didn't, and as the defender you kind of need your units to punch above their weight across the board for you to have a positive outcome. So considering that start, I think Rhudaur has done pretty well over on this side, to be honest with you. I think Rhun may be acting as support. I think he was trying to hold a little bit too much back, considering the front loading of the defences. And Mordor, of course, there's really no excuse for being as clumsy as they were with their elites in that situation. If it was intentional, and trying to sort of clump up the enemy for the Rangers, there's nowhere near enough dead bodies here to have made the Rangers a worthwhile gambit, so I still think it was the wrong thing to do. I don't know what was... I think I'd be more willing to forgive a misjudgment rather than him just forgetting about it, because forgetting about those elite units is clumsiness and negligence. Whereas if it was at least intentional, at least he was actively trying something and it just didn't work out. Nar Rim doing damage. Most of those Dwarven, there are Glade Masters in there. Not a bad target for the Nar Rim to be going after, in all fairness. Orc Archers continue to try and make something happen as well. Keldon River Patrol throwing a volley of javelins in over the Orc Archers into the Gamp Rim. Again, the right choice. That is something that I will say has been greatly to the attackers' credit in this battle. Well, actually to the defenders' credit as well. Everyone really has known exactly the kind of units to be going after. They haven't been unthinkingly using their ranged units. There's been a rhyme and a reason to how both the attackers and the defenders have been using their ammunition here. Those Keldon River Patrol though are getting absolutely butchered by those Nar Rim. from up on the hill. Fragile to archers. There go the Temple Executioners. Gave as good as they got, to be fair, but the Morroquendi bows as well. Again, not bothering with the Orc archers, just going straight for the Gamp Rim, killing them off, and they're not going to achieve all that much by sitting here. The poor Easterlings. A lot of damage being done there. Let's see here. Yeah, what's left of Gondor and the Hobbits. It's not exactly a hugely inspiring army, but it's, you know, it's something. And they're all going to be able to link together for the final push. This is a little bit more standard for BUHR SAGATH. In the late game, one last push to the palace at the top. This, I think, is the defender's main hope at this stage. A nice linear fight. And this thing. The Dragon's Breath Cannon. Will it be enough? I kind of doubt it. Gamp Rim turning their backs on these units. I mean, if they could get out of here with any of them intact, it would be something. Just look at the damage being done here. River Patrol. Poison arrows still coming in. Still a decent amount of reinforcements here. You can see here that Erebor, and in particular Erebor, I have to say, still have a good amount of units left. I'm not sure what these lads are doing. I don't know what the purpose of going right the way around is. Maybe to try and avoid the Narv Rim, but that seems like an awfully long way to go just to do that. There's not enough frames left in the battle for them to even make it to the town centre if they go that way, I don't think. We're into the final 10k, certainly. I mean, it is reasonably close in terms of the percentages left, but I just think the strength, and also, even if it does turn into a linear fight that favours the Dragon's Breath, there are these lads, the Blacklock Engineers, which should be enough to tilt it back in the Dwarves' favour once again. Dragonslayers of Ered Mithrin, I should say, won't be too concerned about taking arrow fire. They are certainly tanky enough. There is actually some fighting going on here. Yes, indeed, the Gamp Rim. They were trying to get away, and of course, immediately the units that were fighting on the other side jump on them, and they are not going to be allowed to make it all the way back to the final stand, so no more relief is going to be coming for those that are defending the palace at the top, any more than there already is. Look at this guy. They're broken and fighting to the death, so that should be any attack should land. He's parrying though. Look at this. A parry master. There he goes. Finally killed. Right, come on, Dwarves. What are you doing? There's been a bit of a theme in this battle as well. Sort of. It's a theme in most battles, to be fair. I'm going to be complaining about that until the end of time, where there's just sort of lulls where nothing seems to be happening. No one seems to be moving. And it's very strange to behold. Well, actually we're going to go back up to times 6 speed because we may as well. There's unlikely to be anything in the way of a confrontation until the Dwarves make it up here. Some ranged battles, I suppose. Scion Rim moving backwards again. Just one unit of E-Strong crossbows. Dragon's Wrath crossbows as well, but even in this situation I don't trust them to not have line of sight issues. Back down to 1 speed now. Yeah, one of the great disappointments of the game, the Dragon's Wrath crossbows, at least in this patch, they will be made more useful in the hotfix because they're going to be made effectively the same as the Blacklocks, at least temporarily, while they decide what to do with them mechanically for the long term. Longbottom mob throwing their pebbles, doing their bit to continue the attackers' upward momentum. Don't know what these Alvalin marksmen are doing. I mean, they're going to absorb a little bit of ammunition, which is not entirely sure why the defenders wanted to shoot them, to be honest with you, but here we are. This is the world we live in. Dunedain Rangers. Only 4 of them alive, but still every little helps, and once again it's going to be up to the Hobbits to fulfill their natural role, as it seems, in Reforged as cannon fodder. More bolts coming forward. Wards of the White Tower. So Gondor and the Hobbits once again and Dorwinion the most eager to leap into the breach. Oh no, they did actually do some damage there, to give them credit. They hit the Keldwyn River Patrol, not by design, I think. They might be going after the Glade Masters, actually. In come the Proudfoot Protectors. Erebor still, as the dwarves are, painfully slow. I mean, when they do arrive, I just don't think that Rhun are going to have the strength on the front line to withstand them. Yeah, the crossbowmen are alright. The Carmels chosen are good, but I mean, unless the cannon gets absolutely inch-perfect shots, I doubt it. The Narim, like when you, again, as I said earlier on when the Rhudaur marksman was being committed, like when the lines of infantry you're going to be committing in are battered archers that are out of ammunition, it's kind of desperate measures really, and unless the battle is closer than it currently is, it's probably not going to yield the kind of results you want.
It is coming for us.
What is coming for you? It's always been a confusing voice file, that one. Morroquendi bows doing the right thing, to be fair, because the crossbows are still capable of dealing a pretty decent amount of damage, so to kill them off like this is just fine. And then even if they run out of ammo, the Morroquendi bows are pretty decent in melee, as most heavier elven archers are. I mean, I appreciate these guys moving in, but I mean the support is, as I said, very slow. In fact, the dwarves are just sort of hanging out, letting their allies take the damage for them. Again, I'm never a big fan of this. I'm not a big fan of Erebor in general, and I'm to be fair, I'm even less of a fan of players just sort of sat there, just waiting for their allies to do the dirty work for them, and then to sweep in and try and claim the glory. It's one of the reasons why I've been more tempted, in spite of the huge losses they took, to give the attacker MVP to either the Hobbits or Gondor. Possibly Dorwinion as well, because of the multitasking. As for the defenders, I'd have to give that to Rhudaur, just because the amount of damage they were able to lay down, the position they set up, the organisation was just much better. Rhun, I think they kept too much back here, not being too useful. Mordor, of course, clumsy with the cavalry and clumsy with the elite units, which is never what you need in a defence. Like, that's far too much value that you're putting on the line there. I can understand not wanting to go into the cannon, to be honest, but I mean, you don't really have a choice. The impetus is on you to attack as the attacker. The defender, they're already backs to the wall here. Carmel's chosen and one unit of Flagrim is all they have in reserve. Well, and technically this Narim unit as well. The only infantry units they have in reserve to hold the line. And like I said, I just don't see that being enough, to be honest with you. So it's looking like BUHR SAGATH is going to fall to the forces of good. I wonder what they would do with this place. I wonder how they would redecorate it. Doesn't look like the sort of place where you could easily plant Hobbit gardens, to be honest with you. It looks a bit too ashen and rocky. Gondor could probably make a pretty nice fortress here, which is probably what they would want to do. Probably not great for vineyards either, or vineyards for Dorwinion. The dwarves, it's pretty mountainous, so yeah, the dwarves or Gondor would probably be okay with this land. Dorwinion and the Hobbits, probably slightly less so, which is probably a good thing as well, because I'm pretty sure the dwarves are going to be the ones with like actual people left to man this place. The other three attacking armies are not going to have all that much remaining. Narim now joining the fray, trying to shore up this line for as long as they possibly can. Projectiles being traded back and forth. There are the Elvelyn marksman Morroquendi bows moving forward once again. Come on, Dwarven player, you can do it. I know you can. Look how much is left in this battle. Not that much. You can move in. The time is now to be aggressive. Moving forwards with my crossbows? Surely not. I mean, this is what I would imagine to be the decisive blow in this battle. The Blacklock Engineers are getting into position. Unless the Dragon's Breath shoots them and does significant damage to them now, they have the position here to do the business on the runic front line, and as soon as that's the case, all the dwarves need to do is flood forward with what's left of their infantry, and it's GG. game over. And ultimately, I think you have to say, because of the cavalry not really paying for itself, like the defenders have always been trying to make up for that lost value. In places they've managed it, but not enough. They missed the Blacklock Engineers, only getting a grazing hit on the Elvelyn Marksman, which is a consolation prize at best. Again, the Blacklock Engineers have the same effect as Rangers, so I'm having to sort of observe from on high. Some of them are firing. That's going to be a lot of damage. Combined with the poison arrows and the Morroquendi bows, that could be enough to rout some of the runic units, actually. And we're right on the red line, although I don't know if they can actually rout. Can they rout up there? I don't think they can. So they have to rout into the attacking army. Points off for Erebor, though, for this. Like, it's the final stand. At least give your opponent the opportunity. Send everything in. Nice big fight at the end. You don't get like extra credit for having units left at the end untouched. I say untouched, a lot of these units probably have taken losses from archers and the like, but just throw everything in. Even if you do it one by one to spread out the damage from the cannon. Like, look at the damage that the front line of Rhun is taking here because of the black blocks. Like, there's no way back into this for Rhun at this point. The least you can do is give them the opportunity to get some kills in melee. Pad your own kill count as well in melee. But I suppose that's just my viewpoint on things. Some players do like to be cautious, I suppose, but it's never the sort of thing that I'm going to say, yes, more caution please. I'm much more about the all-in mentality. Dragon's Breath might even be out of ammunition here, you know. Rhun are also somewhat guilty of this. I know that sending them in there is a death sentence because of the Blacklock Engineers, but I mean, you don't stand a chance anyway. May as well charge in there. Try and make something happen. Morroquendi bows. Firing into the Dragon's Wrath crossbows. What's remaining of the Flag Rim are now being committed to the front line. Again, AP. Not so useful against the Elves that have just joined in though, and the Nandor Glade Guard. And the Glade Masters as well are in there, so they're going to do a lot of damage, and indeed, Dorwinion will be the ones to reap the benefits of those kills. There goes the General. Dragon's Breath. Just going right through its own army there. Routing most of it as well. So I mean, the final gambit was to just sort of fire blindly into the blob, and they ended up doing more damage to their own army than the enemy, but I mean still. You got to give credit for Rhun's willingness there. Carmel's Chosen charging in. Hey, there's a good hit. Erebor Legionaries. I mean, I know this is what the Dwarven player was trying to avoid, but there's no way to avoid it. You may as well just rip the band-aid off and get it over with. Charge in so that they don't really have a good shot on you. If you really are uncomfortable sending everything in, then just leave a couple of units back, but don't leave all of your infantry units back here. Look at this. Keldrin River Patrol. And as a result, the Dwarves probably do have less kills overall than some of their allies. Rhudaur's kill count is probably absolutely monstrous. As unsteady as an egg on a stick. It's always been an another interesting one. Not as iconic as bolder than a rooster, I think, but there you go. One of the attacking armies is gone, and I think, yeah, it must be Gondor. Which, I mean, fair enough, Gondor and the Hobbits, of course, have been at the forefront of most of the punishment that's been meted out in this particular battle. Still the Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen back there. This is a little bit more like it from the Dwarves now. Enough messing around, we're charging in. Now we will deal with what's left, and the Carmel's Chosen all alone on this front line. Not going to last too much longer. There's some Eastron crossbows, there's some Dragon's Wrath crossbows. The cannon. Obviously the crew of the cannon is not particularly impressive in melee. Easy enough to deal with. Cranking up another few shots. Well, there goes the Dwarven General. this is where pushing through comes into things. Like, this is what I mean. Like, charging in doesn't necessarily mean you just sort of hang around there. You can push on through. The dwarves have got good mass. Rhune's army is in tatters. They don't really have an army as such anymore. Individuals standing in the way. In come the elves. That looks rather stiff charging animation there from the elves. Usually they sort of have a much more elegant way of charging in than that, but still, they're here. Into the Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen. Huge bombards. That's usually a sign, actually, that that they're out of ammunition, when you can see the huge bombard's name. Maybe I'm wrong. These strong crossbows are gone, and this is going to be the end, of course. Close though, 10% exactly. It's going to be the differential here, which I think is fair enough. I do think ultimately the defenders were always playing catch up, and the individual lapses in judgment, I'll call it, from Mordor and Rhun are the sort of thing that is very difficult to come back from in a siege where you're outnumbered in this way. And I think the attackers, all they really needed to do was play it by the book, and that's exactly what they did. And they get the victory from it. Mercenary guildsmen in here. Again, the mercenary guildsmen are sort of standard medieval aesthetic with their sort of sallets and their maces and this general style of their armour. Maybe they could be made to look a little bit more Middle-earthy, in the same way that most of Cardland was. Cardland really wouldn't have looked out of place in standard medieval too in the previous patch, but now they were made more Númenórean. And there we go. And yeah, mostly dwarves left. Very limited amount of hobbits and Avari elves from Dorwinion as well. Actually some Keldon Rube patrol in there as well. Yeah, Erebor, because of the caution of, obviously had the least amount of kills. The hobbits had the most though, which is kind of interesting considering they were the ones that almost certainly took an awful lot of damage as well. Rhudaur with the most amount of kills for the defenders. Again, unsurprisingly, the hobbits with by far the large... Well, I say by far. They did have the largest army on the field, but Rhudaur actually went pretty heavy in for the numbers themselves. And I still go back to that Mordor leaving their elite units in there. Like, with that kind of army, like, it's clearly quality focused, and to throw so much of it away because you weren't paying attention, it's never going to go well in that sort of situation. Rhun had their part to play though. Like, Rhun could have supported that area a little bit more. They could have still shot from the cliff with their Narvrim, but they could have also sent in some Gamprim and Scionrim to help them out, and instead of the final stand, maybe just try and hold there. Easier said than done, because they were ultimately going to lose on the other side, but the amount of troops that the Hobbits and Gondor had left wasn't exactly a devastating amount. I think they could have held that by just sending a few units over there. And they could have also used the cannon better. I think the battle, to be honest with you, was there for the defenders to win. It was just lapses in judgment that ultimately cost them that. But fair play. I think the attackers, they played it by the book. On one side they were a little bit more aggressive, on one side a little bit more conservative, but for the most part, kind of how you'd expect a battle like this to be run if you're attacking into a settlement. And ultimately that was enough to give them the victory, as you would expect. Like, if you're the attackers and you make not many mistakes, you put yourself in a decent position to win the battle. Whereas obviously if you're the defenders and you make mistakes, obviously going to be quite difficult. Let's see what did the damage for the dwarves though. Ironfoot crossbows and Blacklock engineers racking up decent kills. The Ironfoot warriors breaking 100 as well. Ultimately you can see the units that weren't really committed to melee at the end there. Unsurprisingly, the Obsidian Guard didn't even see battle really, which is unfortunate for them. But yeah, the initial waves of Ironfoots on that first Mordor defence did well, and from there obviously it was also the ranged units, and they mobbed over the elites. Like, the Dragon Slayers didn't get many kills, but most of those kills would have been on stuff like Temple Executioners and Nazgul. So obviously high quality kills there indeed. As for the rest, like for the Hobbits, I would imagine it was the supporting units. I can't imagine they did a huge amount of damage with their infantry, because it got killed so quickly by rangers and axe throwers and the like. And there's a loud motorbike outside. But yeah, Gondor, 1,000 kills. They were a little bit more about the survivability anyway. So them and the Hobbits with their aggressive push. Dorwinion though as well, played their part as well. Like I said, the attackers, I don't think anyone was especially outstanding for the attackers, but they all played their part, and they supported one another where they needed to, and that was enough. Like I said, I think the defenders could have won it if they just had a little bit better judgment, a little bit better execution. But again, like, hindsight is 20/20, as they say. Like, I'm sure the Runic player would probably choose to do things a little bit differently. The Mordor player would obviously remember to not put their elite units in that position. I think Rhudaur did very well though. I think Rhudaur did play their part. I think if you could say anything, maybe the Coldfell Maidens could have been used a little bit better, but that's it's difficult to use Coldfell Maidens well in that situation, especially against the kind of opponents that there were here. So you can't really hold that against him too much, especially when he used his knights to kill the Ents as well. So yeah, big thank you to Arkan, the Erebor player, for sending this one to me. Big thank you to all the players that were a part of this one as well. Obviously, BUHR SAGATH is always a bit of a long siege because of the kind of battle that it is. Sort of choke pointy, uphill, very nice defensive positions as well. But on this occasion, the forces of good, the attackers, were able to take the settlement. As for what's next, I mean, the hotfix is now out, I believe, as I'm writing this. I've certainly been sent it, but I think it's now available for everyone to download. So I think from now on, although I think this is going to be several days before this actually releases, but regardless, I will be sort of trying to do a few of the larger battles I still have on the old build, this build. But I am going to be trying to transition across, and I will be giving more and more priority now to the new build, of course, because that's where the better, the sort of the more up-to-date version of the game is, the improvements are, and so that will be the idea moving forward. But I will still be doing battles on this build. Like, if people do send me more battles from this build, like, depending on what they are, I might do them. But like I said, like, the preference will be given to the newly released build. But yeah, as I said, like, same sort of thing applies. Like, we're still obviously sort of not really knowing what to do with ourselves because of the virus situation, and then there's obviously Bannerlord coming out soon. So everything I said previously still holds true. So at least for the next month or so, that's how it's going to remain. So yeah, interesting times, I suppose. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.